Duncan, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Hi, Steve. It's great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Blue Yonder is a leader in supply chain management software, but some of our listeners are probably not familiar with the company, especially because of the name change a couple of years ago. So please describe Blue Yonder's business and a bit about its history, and also why did it change its name?
Okay, yeah. So we're the largest supply chain software company in the world, and we deliver digital supply chain transformation for like the largest retailers, manufacturers, and logistics providers. We've got 3,000 customers, and they're literally the largest brands in the world. So whenever you see a truck or you have a product in a grocery store or a car is coming off a manufacturing line, it's in general it's being orchestrated and it's there because Blue Yonder software put it there. So that's basically what we do, and we deliver business outcomes around customer sat and profitable growth and more resilient supply chains, which is very important in today's world, and ultimately sustainability. So that's what we do. The company changed its name because we felt like our old name JDA didn't really reflect where the business was going, and we had acquired a company called Blue Yonder, ironically, in Germany. It was sort of a cloud native, authentic AI company, and they've been doing AI for 10 years. And when they decided to basically look, and they had some weird German acronym, and when they decided to change the name of it, they hired a marketing firm. And I remember the professor that founded the firm. He was up on an island just north of Hamburg, and he was stood on the beach, and he got this email from this marketing firm, and they gave him the choice of sort of three names. And he looked out, and it was like this beautiful blue sky, beautiful dark blue ocean, and white sand, and the first name said Blue Yonder. And he looked out at that, and he sent the picture to his executive team, and he put Blue Yonder on it and sent it to them. And he said to me, what it evoked for him is that if you're a pilot and you're flying really, really high, you can see the curvature of the earth, right? And what you can actually see is you can see beyond the horizon. You can see what's coming. And that's fundamentally what they did. They used AI to predict and see what people couldn't. And that's why the sort of name you have sort of Blue Yonder.
You've been CEO at Blue Yonder for a couple of years now. So tell us a little bit about your career path and what your business goals are for Blue Yonder.
I've always been in supply chain software and come from an engineering background. And that's very much the philosophy that I've brought to Blue Yonder. We're very much an engineering centered company. And what that means is we have a belief that if you get the product right, a lot of other things will take care of itself. And that's reflected in that, we're spending in the next 3 years $1 billion in R&D. So that's very much our core philosophy. And, it's sort of like the 5 whys. When you see customer problems or you see problems that Blue Yonder might be having, if you ask the 5 whys, you ultimately end up with something you can solve in the factory in engineering. And that's very much a core tenet of ours. And the second thing would be innovation. Innovation is the engine that drives the company. Last year we filed over 130 patents, mostly around AI. So it's really something we do. We challenge conventional thinking in everything we do. We look for step changes in value for customers. The dirty secret of enterprise software is that the R and R&D doesn't exist, right? And it's actually research that actually drives fundamental breakthroughs. And that's very much what we do. So that's sort of core to the company.
Yeah. So you're in the supply chain space. Do you actually occupy every major position in your portfolio in that space, or are there some gaps?
We're arguably the broadest, most complete end-to-end solution in supply chain management. It's everything from, the assortment you put in front of the consumer to how you forecast demand, where, when, what, where it's going to take place, how you fulfill it, all the inventory management, the production line in a manufacturing plant, how you orchestrate thousands of trucks for, a CPG manufacturer or a large logistics company, all the way to a warehouse operation. So we run the gamut of it. And, that's one of the reasons why a lot of large companies come to us, because they want an integrated, cohesive set of applications that are designed to work together. Yeah, it's called the supply chain, right? We want the chains to be linked. So I've been in Supply chain software my whole life, right? I'm from England, but the US has butchered my accent, so I sound Australian or South African. But my first job out of uni in London was actually implementing a warehouse management system, which is basically, we have one of those at Blue Yonder. And then from there, I went on into engineering and literally wrote forecasting and replenishment fulfillment systems from the ground up. So I've always been on sort of the customer value side, which gives you a lot of empathy, and sort of applied thinking around how you do software, and then on the engineering side. And that's, it's very rare to have an engineering CEO in software. They normally come from finance or IT or sales. And so we're an engineering led company.
Duncan, in the wake of COVID, global supply chains and supply chain management software have been tested like never before. You call it an age of uncertainty. What kinds of uncertainty are you referring to, and what can we do about it?
It's a great question, Steve. It represents a generational and structural shift in how supply chains are being tested today. And it's driven by both the demand side and the supply side in terms of what's creating this uncertainty. On the demand side, over the last 20 years, we've seen a massive shift in consumer behavior, right? That's been driven by the rapid growth and adoption of digital technology. So it's e-commerce, personalization, on-demand services, all of those things, right? And fundamentally, when you think about e-commerce, supply chains weren't designed to efficiently ship like single parcels in the last mile to someone's home, right? So that demand side has caused a lot of structural shifts in it. But the bigger disruptions have occurred on the supply side, and if you think about it, over the last 20, 30 years, world supply chains were powered by, using China as the factory for the world and a labor arbitrage play, and this notion of globalization and just in time, right? And what the pandemic exposed and all of the regional friction we have with China is that's not going to work in going forward. So it's had supply chain executives step back and say, how do I solve for this? And when JP Morgan did a study of the S&P 1500, and what they found over the last 2 years is that working capital's gone up by 40%, right? So that's over $500 billion of fundamentally inventory people have added to their balance sheet to try and be more resilient in response to a supply shock or a demand surprise. And our perspective is that's not the answer to resiliency. The answer to resiliency is software, right? Mm-hmm. But a new breed of supply chain software that in our world is fundamentally enabled by Snowflake.
I understand that you're building your suite of cloud applications on top of the Snowflake AI data cloud. Why did you pick Snowflake as your strategic partner?
So, if you think about all the challenges I talked about earlier around the age of uncertainty and the need for a new paradigm, we're very, very fortunate because there's been the emergence of sort of revolutionary technology over the last few years, right? The rise of artificial intelligence, and not just Gen AI, but predictive AI and machine learning and all of that. The rise of cheap and abundant robots, right? And then lastly, the rise of the data cloud with Snowflake. And when you take those three things together, it's basically a new canvas on top of which to reimagine how supply chain software should work to enable this new world. How do you deliver resiliency and sustainability and profit without trading them off? And, I talked earlier about the fact that supply chain applications are very, very siloed, right? You have, different application topologies across the landscape, and they're all sitting on data silos. And you end up moving data around and doing transformations. There's a lot of latency. There's a lot of inefficiency. And because the volumes are so enormous here, you end up with a lot of batch, right? And it just means companies are not as agile as they should be. And that's the fundamental thing that Snowflake allowed us to shatter that paradigm by almost creating a single database for the world's supply chains that solve that problem at scale.
Right, because you talked about the importance of integrating all of your applications. Well, perhaps the most important thing is having them all draw from the same database. And that's the Snowflake
correct.
cloud.
And, yeah, exactly. Right. And you think about, the premise of Snowflake around solving this challenge of data gravity, where data gets so large and so diverse, it becomes inefficient to move it around. Right. So what you should be doing is moving the apps to the data. And that's exactly the architecture that we built.
Right. Very good. So at Blue Yonder, you're mashing up a lot of different powerful software. your cloud applications, the Snowflake AI data cloud, large language models, generative AI. And as I understand it, you're using relational AI as knowledge graph management system, which is something I just learned about a few months ago. So how do these technology pieces work together to provide supply chain management capabilities that were not previously available?
Yeah, and the not previously available is the key here, right?
Yeah.
It truly is revolutionary technology that allows you to shatter constraints that have held supply chain management back. The idea that you have to have different data silos and different types of application stacks to do planning or warehousing or what have you. And that's fundamentally one of the biggest things that Snowflake did. If you think about their mandate, it was let's revolutionize analytics, right? Let's revolutionize collaboration, and let's revolutionize enterprise applications. And we were the first enterprise software company to write our applications natively on top of Snowflake.
Mm.
And we do a ton of work with them. You just look at our machine learning workloads. We run 10 billion predictions a day on the data cloud. I mean, it's staggering, 10 billion a day. And that wouldn't be possible in a normal architecture, right? You need the way Snowflake is built with this sort of the infinitely elastic compute, separating storage from compute, things like zero copy cloning, which allows us to run mass simulations. All of that, when you combine it together, is what allows us to do what we do, which is let's kill batch. Let's not have an hourglass, when it's running a compute in the user interface, right? Let's get rid of all the latency you have by moving data around. And if you think about supply chains from a business perspective, all of the metrics in this industry are oriented around time and speed, right? It's just in time. It's, order, on time in full. It's how fast are your turns. They're all about speed. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we leverage Snowflake and that application technology stack you talked about, and we look to eradicate latency everywhere, right? How can we build the fastest software rails in the world for supply chain management and allow our customers to get inside the competitors sort of, decide, sense, decide, and act loop? That's fundamentally what it allows us to do.
Yeah. Interesting. So your customers can be very responsive, and it also kind of reduces their use of resources and capital for those resources. So yeah,
Absolutely.
very interesting.
Yeah, that's our trends. It's working capital efficiency, right?
Yeah.
The faster you're turning your inventory, I mean, all of that. So speed is everything in supply chain.
Yeah. Now, I've watched a number of videos of you talking about how technology can help transform business, and you're really good at this. You have a knack for it. I wonder if you can give us and give the podcast listeners today kind of an example, kind of blow by blow of how your customer and their end customers benefit from this kind of responsiveness.
Yeah, so that maybe there's two examples there, Steve, right? The first would be around really at the root of age of uncertainty. And the second one I'll give is more on the demand side and consumer behavior. So if you think about disruption, what happens today because supply chains aren't joined up on a common data cloud, and let alone inside the enterprise, and certainly don't do it across multiple organizations, a supplier, a carrier, a retailer, if you like, a manufacturer. So what happens today, on average, it takes 4.5 days to learn of a supply disruption, right? A ship could be leaving late, or a supplier runs out of a raw material. It takes 4.5 days to learn of that disruption, right? And normally it's email or who knows, fax, right? And then it takes on average over 2 weeks to actually resolve it, right? That's what happens today because it's opaque. You don't know what's going on. So by having all your applications on sort of a real-time single data cloud, all the applications are designed to work together, and then having a network, we announced the intent to acquire a company, One Network, which takes that visibility outside the enterprise across 150,000 companies. You now have visibility, right? Not only do you instantly see when you have a supply disruption, because everyone's joined up and you have a single version of the truth, you can very quickly orchestrate an optimal outcome and execute, right? So that's basically fundamentally, you don't just need visibility, you need the ability to be joined up, make the best decision. That's where AI comes in, and then orchestrate multiple stakeholders to actually solve it. That would be an example of how we've gone about solving uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, in that scenario, so does that mean that all of your customers' suppliers, all the way back to all the sources, are on Snowflake too, or is that or what's the source of transparency and visibility?
Yeah, they don't have to be.
Yeah,
But obviously, if you're a retailer, you're communicating to your suppliers, you're communicating to your logistics provider or your trucking fleet, all of that. So all of that data gets pulled into Snowflake, and then we obviously use AI to optimize how do we resolve this risk or this disruption?
right.
How do we capitalize on this opportunity? That's basically how it works.
Yeah, good example.
So
What was the second one?
yeah, so the second one was more on the demand side. So,
Okay.
one of the things that's happened, and digital technology has certainly accelerated this, is that consumers want to personalize the products that they're buying, right? And probably or configure them, certainly. And where that's probably most prevalent and obvious to the audience is in the automotive space, right? Every single car you want to buy now, you configure. I want heated seats. I don't want heated seats. I want adaptive control. I don't. And what that has is, and by the way, it's part of this process. You're seeing dealerships get disintermediated, all that as well, right? So
Yeah,
what that has is a profound impact on how the automotive manufacturing chain, production line works. So you think about it, every car that's coming down that production line could be completely unique. This is the furthest thing from Ford and the Model T, where everything is black and it's exactly
right.
the same, right? So every car that's coming down it is completely different. So what that means is you have to swap out tooling. Okay, this tool here, this robot installs a heated seat. Wait, it's not a heated seat. Take it out, put another one in. So you have this change over time. And the second thing is the raw materials or the components that you're staging along that line are also different. You need heated seats, you don't need heated seats. So it drives a huge amount of complexity and inefficiency in the production line and makes it less productive, right? So we have a solution that basically optimizes how you slot and sequence that whole line to minimize changeover. And we ripple it all the way down the supply chain in terms of when components need to arrive in time, right? So that's an example of how changing behavior on the consumer side has a profound impact on the supply side and how you can kind of optimize the two things. So you have happy consumers and you have a happy automotive manufacturer.
Yeah, yeah. So it seems like the way that would play out would be that the dealer would have a bunch of the most popular trims sitting on the lot, but not having to have a huge inventory. And many of the cars they sell would be essentially custom built for a particular customer, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So the whole world has moved from what they call make to stock to make to order or configure to order. And it comes back to speed, right? How quickly can you get, I want to wait a year, but the faster you can make it, the more efficient you can make it. It enables that whole consumer behavior.
So you're a business leader, also with engineering background, and you take a deep interest in technology. So I'm going to ask you to put on your kind of visionary cap for a couple of minutes.
Mhm.
Looking out 5 years or more, how do you see technology transforming business and even society?
God, I could spend a long time talking about this one. So
Let it
obviously,
rip,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Obviously, I'll come back to generative AI in a moment.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
obvious one, right? But when I step back and I look at what we're doing at Blue Yonder, right? Part of our purpose is to basically deliver something we call sustainable abundance.
Hmm.
And what that is, and I'll unpack it. Like the abundance part is, but we call it our good quest, and it comes from a famous quote by a Facebook engineer who said, sort of, the tragedy of their generation is the brightest minds are working on getting people to click on ads, right? And they're at the root of all these algorithms that are basically, reprogramming humanity, and it's and undermining trust in society, which is a really important currency. So good quests, that's a bad quest. Good quests are things that are operationally hard and consequential and make the world better, right? So curing cancer, colonizing Mars, things like that. So our good quest is all around sustainable abundance. And if you think about supply chains, they're at the heart of human endeavor. They underpin commerce and trade everywhere it happens. And they've lifted over time, all the way back to the Silk Roads, they've lifted billions of people out of poverty into the middle class, and they'll continue to do that. But if you look at the role of technology and invention, it's always been an amplifier for that, right? So the role of technology fundamentally is you turn scarcity into abundance, right? We now have cheap clothing. We have abundant medicine for most people. And that's sort of the role of technology. So think about the invention of money, the invention of the steam engine, the invention of the internet, the shipping container. All of those things were an amplifier to supply chain. So the first part of our good quest is, how do we usher in the next wave of abundance, right? And lift even more people out of poverty into the middle class and all of that. That's sort of the first part of abundance. But the other part of it is do it in a more sustainable way.
Yeah.
So supply chains produce 60% of all the carbon emissions in the world, right? So we can certainly do better than that. And supply chains, the dark side of abundance is it also creates waste, right? So you take food waste. Globally, 1 billion meals a day are wasted, but there's almost 800 million people that go hungry every day.
Right.
In the US fashion industry, brands overproduce 500 billions of goods annually, right? So that's another part of sustainability. It's not just carbon emissions, it's also waste. So that's sort of our missions. How do we deliver sustainable abundance with the software and the technology that we provide to the largest brands in the world? That's sort of the first part of what I'll talk about. Generative AI, obviously, though, is a super important moment in the arc of human history. And it has some interesting impacts on enterprise software and even how enterprise software works, right? So I always talk about the notion in software, we've always had a user experience, and we call it a UI, right? And fundamentally, it's the way a user, a human, interacts with a computer to instruct it to automate certain things. And when software first came out, it was like a DOS prompt. It was like a text box. Kind of ironically, we've gone back to that. And then you had the graphical interface, and it was a GUI, and I had a mouse. And then mobile came along, and I was dealing with that. So every computing paradigm has brought a different user experience to it. The difference this time is it's not the I, it's not the interface being updated. It's the you. The user is being updated. And it's like we're downloading sort of a cognitive upgrade for all of humanity, right? Like
We're
a
being
patch.
augmented. Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's
So
very
will we
nice.
be augmented? Will we be replaced? Like, how does it work? And I think it's going to happen an awful lot faster than we appreciate, So that's something we're wrestling with is how do we help our users in this sort of change management journey? How do we amplify what they do? In some cases, we view it as our end users are all getting a promotion. If you were an individual contributor, you were a planner, an inventory manager, a warehouse operator, now you might be the manager of 20 digital agents, right? What does that user experience look like, right? So in business, it's going to be very, very profound, and it will have a huge impact on society as well. So it's actually a super exciting time.
Oh, absolutely. Do you think the managers of futures will force their digital agents to have annual reviews?
I don't know. It'll be, but that 360 loop will be very, very interesting. We just hired a couple of people from Tesla, basically to help us figure out, how do you build trust with humans when things become more autonomous, right? And if you think about the evolution of the automobile, we've introduced autonomy little bits at a time, right? You don't have to wrap around with the fan to get the temperature you want. It just does it automatically. The wipers come on when it's raining. The lights come on when it's dark. And obviously, then we introduced adaptive cruise control. It will slow if it sees it. Like, when do you ultimately trust and take the steering wheel completely? And we're going through that same journey with software, right? At what point do you trust it to do more and more and more and more? The complexity will be, we've always talked about explainability in AI, right? Why did you recommend to do that? And it'll come to a point where the AI is so smart, it will become very, very hard to actually explain it to a human. So there's a lot of change management here. But at the moment, it's critical that we have humans in the loop.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So are you using large language models and generative AI now, or is that something for the future?
We've been doing this for 18 months. I mean, it's one of the frustrations, Steve, right, is that everyone's now an AI company. They just add .ai to the domain name, they use OpenAI, and they put a wrapper on it, and they do text summarization. They're an AI company.
Yeah.
We've authentically been doing this for over a decade, but it was in machine learning and predictive AI, which apparently isn't sexy anymore, right? And like I said, we do 10 billion predictions a day, and it's growing at 1 billion a month, right? So it was very natural for us to leverage generative AI. And we've been doing it, at scale for a while.
I understand you had a close working relationship with Frank Slootman, Snowflake's former CEO, and that you're developing one with the new Snowflake CEO, Sridhar Ramaswamy. And in fact, I heard that the two of you had breakfast together recently. So without giving away any state secrets, can you tell us what you talked about?
Yeah, so Frank and me were on stage last year at our user conference, and we've got a very, very deep partnership. We share the same vision around, you know, building the world's largest supply chain data cloud, um,
Yeah.
and our relationship is been very, very close on the engineering side. Like I said, we were the first company to write applications natively on Snowflake, and we work very closely around Snowflake's roadmap. And Sridhar obviously comes from kind of the product and engineering side, much like me. So even before Frank departed, Sridhar was actually our executive sponsor, and we worked very, very closely together. So this was a very clean and great transition for us. And Sridhar, we had a great breakfast. We always start with talking about how do we make our customers even more successful? How do we deliver more value for them? The neat thing about us is that our software is bought by the business. It's not bought by IT. So we bring a very applied, business-oriented mindset to where Snowflake can take its product, and kind of what are the workloads and problems that we're trying to solve. And like I said, if you can solve the technical problems I talked about in supply chain with our scale and the mission criticality of it, you can solve it in any industry. And those are things we always talk about, right? How can we go faster? How can we innovate? But all on behalf of end customer success and value. So that's always what we talk about.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, this has been a great conversation. I mean, I think you're in addition to being a smart businessman and deep on technology, you're also a good talker. So very nice speaking to you today. I really loved when you were talking about the age of uncertainty. We're in it, and not just in supply chains, but in lots of ways. And sometimes it takes a bit of a crisis or real urgency for organizations to change. And I think the opportunity and the need is there. So hopefully we'll see a lot of transformation. The other thing I thought you said that was it's very encouraging to me because I'm really onto this, but the idea of you believe in sustainable abundance, that's your good quest. And whenever you look around the world at, GDP growth and more consumption and things like that, that's kind of great for the economy. But on the other hand, it's not so great for the environment. So
Yeah.
if somebody can come up with really powerful tools that allow us to bring up the standard of living of millions and millions and millions of people without kind of burning, the earth to a cinder, that is a great deed, and I'm glad that you're very consciously pursuing that. So
Yeah.
congratulations
One
on
thing on
that.
that, Steve, that's sort of interesting is that,
Yeah,
sometimes it's combinatorial innovation,
yeah,
right? And that's why even you look at robotics, right? The sort of Wright's law, like, the more people buy them, the volume drives cheapest, and you get this kind of like the Amazon flywheel, right?
yeah.
But we're starting to see physical robots, particularly in a warehouse, that are getting combined with Gen AI.
Mm,
So now this dumb robot can actually see and observe the world with human level intelligence, just like you have with Gen AI. So there was a prototype we saw where someone asked a robot that was basically picking toys out of a tray in a warehouse, and it said, "Pick up the extinct toy," and it picked up the dinosaur.
oh my
Like
God,
one
brilliant.
robot. Yes. So when you just think about
Yeah,
so that's going to power robots to be even more and more and more. And the challenge you have a lot of times when you want to train autonomous systems, and it's why we struggle to get the self-driving cars, is it's the edge cases,
yeah,
right? It's the edge cases that cause
extreme.
accidents. But
Yeah,
because you don't see the things with being able to generate images and video now is that we're generating edge cases,
hmm,
billions of hours of them, and training robots on simulated edge cases, right? So it's the combination of all of this. But the place I was going to was energy. Energy is the other thing. When you look at fusion, fission, you look at battery tech, all of
yeah,
that. So talking about unintended consequences. So AI is about data, the algorithm, and compute. Okay. And compute is about energy. That's where the energy comes from.
right, right.
So if you look at the utility stocks in the US are up 20% this year. And the reason why is AI. So AI right now consumes 4.4% of all the energy in the United States. At the end of this year, it's going to be 10.8.
Yeah, yeah,
Mind blowing. Think about it. Look at lights, traffic, and all the stuff we use, like over 10% of it's going to go to AI. So we have to solve the energy thing, right? And I think all of these
Yeah.
things together, like we will figure it out.
Yeah. Well, we have to make AI more efficient. We can't, between crypto and AI, they talk about, like whole countries. We're
Yeah,
using the energies of
exactly.
whole countries.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so we need some really efficient algorithms,
yeah,
and
100%.
training has to be efficient.
Yeah,
So hopefully it, it won't be your company that's solving those problems, but hopefully somebody will.
yeah. Well, we're owned by Panasonic, and they're the battery company behind
Oh,
Tesla.
okay. Oh, very good.
So yeah,
Very
they've
good.
got two bets: us and
Yeah.
batteries. So
Okay. Wonderful,
awesome.
wonderful. Well, Duncan, fantastic talking to you today. I think it's just a great conversation. I think the podcast listeners will love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for inviting me, taking the time. Great questions, good dialogue.